Erik Sten has been a Portland City Commissioner for 1 year. His joyful, energetic campaign, complete with outrageous campaign van, delighted Portlanders. I can tell you that more people signed up for this meeting today than signed up to come and hear the governor, and I can only tell you the Stenites seem to be increasing in numbers constantly. Commissioner Sten has been a Northeast Portland, Irvington neighborhood resident all his life. He was educated in neighborhood schools, he graduated from Grant High School, and then he went to Stanford University with a National Merit Scholarship. Erik has always worked for the city of Portland. He was Commissioner Gretchen Kafori's Chief of Staff and served as liaison to the Bureau of Housing and Community Development, then the Bureau of Parks and Recreation, and Bureau of Emergency Communications. He's even been a lifeguard in Portland pools. Erik has long been interested in housing, education, and environmental efforts. He has sat on housing and neighborhood task forces, and he's won awards for his efforts, the 1995 Excellence in Housing Award and the 1995 Ma Curtis Award for Social Justice. Commissioner Sten's present assignments include the Bureau of Environmental Services, Waterworks, and Hydroelectric Power, and he also leads the offices of Cable Communications and Franchise Management and the Portland Energy Office. Erik Sten's energy, which was so apparent in the election, is clearly being tapped. The wit and humor we also saw then may be the thing that is keeping him on his feet at the present time. He brings all these talents to bear today as he shares with us his perspective of Portland's future. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Erik Sten.
Thank you very much. It's very wonderful to see all of you here today, and I want to thank the City Club for the opportunity to speak. It's a great opportunity after a year in office, and it's really forced me to take the time and to sit back and think a little bit about the things that I've learned and really about Portland's future, which is our subject today. It may sound odd to you, but I always don't get that time in this job, and that's really what the speech has afforded me. So thanks. And why don't you get this time? People often ask me. I thought we elected you to deal with the big picture. And this week was a good example. I spent a lot of the week deciding whether or not something I didn't even think I should think about, whether or not 500-pound tigers should be allowed in the city. And so I spent a lot of time on that. They shouldn't be is what we decided, and if you've got one, get rid of it. The law takes effect in 29 days. We're generous. Another example, what's kept me busy. Shortly after I started, I was assigned the Water Bureau by Mayor Katz. We announced that we were going to make a minute change in the pH balance of the water to comply with current health standards. I'm sitting at my desk. I get a phone call from an angry citizen. She says, "We've killed their tropical fish." I'm aghast. I'm outraged. I can't believe it. I'm a new commissioner. I'm going to do something about it. I call the Water Bureau and I say, "I can't believe what we've done. What are we going to do about this?" The Water Bureau's been through a few commissioners before. They took a deep breath and pointed out to me what had been clearly stated in the Oregonian's article and what I'd forgotten as I was feeling this caller's pain. The pH change took place the next week. So I called her back. I left a message. I said maybe something else had called the fish. She didn't call me back again, so that was that. So it gets kind of busy down there. But I do, as an elected official, frequently get asked about my vision for the city of Portland. As many of you may know, I don't tend to hold back my opinions. But today what I'd like to do is not talk about specific subjects so much, and I'd like to step away from the excitement of this new job and the pressures of my everyday concerns and turn all of our attention to Portland's future. Portland's booming right now. Business is doing better than it ever has. The unemployment rate is at a record low. And through all of this, we've managed to keep Portland the great city we love. Every day at City Hall, I see groups coming from all over the world and certainly from all over the country to take a look at how we've done what we've done. And aside from the academics and the planners, anybody can tell you that Portland is a pretty cool place right now. Go down to the library and have a cup of coffee, walk Belmont, Hawthorne, the business districts of Northeast, and you'll see why we're so blessed to live in this city. From most of these dynamic urban settings, you can still see Mount Hood and you can see blue herons on the river. But if we push on this pleasant image just a bit, I fear we're going to find it soft beneath the surface. And that's what I want to talk about today. Portlanders are nervous. Our booming economy has not been good for everyone. Soaring real estate values have priced many families out of the game. Our much-touted quality of life is beginning to slip and looks suspiciously like that of many other cities. Long rush hour lines of traffic, declining civic participation, despite the good number of people here today, and increased economic and racial segregation. Many of us in this room are concerned that the city we love may be coming apart at the seams. Well, we bask in the glow of this great economy, and it is a great one. We also know that many of the things that we take for granted may not be there. It's a critical time, I think, a crossroads. The future of our city is being decided right now, and I fear that we may be missing the boat. As the growth has increased in this city, so has the split between Portland and the rest of the state. So has the split between homeowners and the government. The average homeowner believes that they are paying more and getting less right now. And guess what? They're right. In the last decade, we have gone from a 50-50 split in the tax burden between business and residential to a 64-36 split. So homeowners are paying more and they are getting less. And they are getting angry as services decline. These changes, these conflicts, along with the excitement of these times, I think has helped us to lose track of some of the things we value. Things we used to take for granted. Good schools, good housing, a good environment, a good standard of living for everyone. These splits, business and citizens, urban and rural, rich and poor, will get worse unless we turn our focus to saving the things that we value. Focus on what we value. That needs to be our starting point. I believe Portland's values are easy to identify. We work hard and we expect the same from everybody else. We want economic success for our businesses and good wages for the people who work at them. We care about our children. We want to protect our environment. We work together. Most of all, we value each other and our collective home. This isn't the first time we've been at a crossroads, and it's certainly not the first time we've had challenges. Go all the way back in the 1850s and 60s. Trade and commercial activity helped create this city. People and money came west from the east for the massive logs from our forests, the crops and livestock from the Willamette Valley, the salmon from our rivers. Portland grew up with that economic boom and that influx of population. We've had big jobs to do, big challenges. When the city needed to construct a 30-mile pipeline from the Bull Run River down the hill to the city, prominent citizens with names you'll recognize, people like Corbett, Schuyler, Ladd, and Deacom, provided the leadership. Their business acumen, along with the shovel, sweat, and persistence of newcomers to Oregon, created an impressive distribution system. Today, 100 years later, we still drink the water those very pipes brought us. We have new pipes, mostly. Every year, 450 Water Bureau employees make sure that the water gets to your house every single day, even in the worst of ice storms. 20 years ago, we faced another very difficult turning point. Remember the recession of the 70s and 80s? The Portland economy was in the toilet. We had a depressed downtown, headed nowhere quick. There was no Pioneer Square, just a big parking lot. Waterfront Park was a strip of highway that bordered a murky, polluted Willamette River. Portland was hardly a place anybody would want to move to. What transformed the city then? Pretty simple. First, Portland took stock of itself We didn't like what we saw, so we got to work. Government and citizens created Portland's first Central City Plan. We focused our economic development efforts, along with millions of dollars, into our downtown corridor and financial incentives for business. A business-friendly government and civic participation of the best kind attracted a diversified list of companies. Was the effort successful? The results are all around us. Now it's time to take stock once again. We have that booming economy, a strong city center, light rail, transit malls, places to go at night, a thriving art scene. Our approach, I think, has been build it and they will come, and it seemed to work. Many of the things we wished for then are now a reality. But not surprisingly, a new set of problems has sprung up with our success. The things we didn't have to worry about in the 1970s have become our pressing concerns. While growth has propelled the economy, we know now that it also put an incredible strain on our community's assets. Growth alone does not improve the schools. Growth alone doesn't reduce crime. And growth alone doesn't bring families closer to the dream of buying their own home. In fact, it may have pushed them further. Portland, it's time again to be bold. Like our predecessors, we need to decide what kind of city we want to be. If we do not confront the problems of 1998, we will become a typical large city. Better run than most, I think, but mired in the typical problems that large cities face and are not solving. It won't be the end of the world, but it will be the end of the Portland that I grew up in. We have to look to new leaders, new ideas, and new partnerships. But as we do so, let's concentrate on some very old Portland values. Let's take our common sense and look at some of today's most pressing debates. If we do, I think we can step away from what seem to be some simple, but ultimately false choices that have plagued our recent public debates. The ones that deliver either-or answers. In the last year on the City Council, probably nothing has frustrated me more than what I call the false choices. We often have become our own worst enemy, in my opinion, pitting people who should be allies against each other. Density or the environment, schools or business, affordable housing or gentrification, runaway growth or no growth, false choices that have us focused on yesterday's questions and not on today's problems. Let's start with growth. After a decade of rampant economic growth, some Portlanders are calling for no growth. Meanwhile, business leaders regale me with the impending doom of downtown if we don't speed up the growth in the central city. Neither side is right. I've felt for years that it's time to change some of our policies. In this economy, we don't need to offer tax abatements to big factories to move here, and we've done that. The City Council does not offer those anymore. But we can't ignore the need for a healthy business climate, and we still need to do work with business, aggressive work. A different focus would promote a sustainable economy, one that engages a broader cross-section of our citizens, one that promotes institutions and economic practices that will last past the time of a decade. We need a more vibrant city without losing our social and neighborhood strengths. We don't need false predictions of economic collapse, and we cannot pretend that no one will move here. If we are successful at protecting our current values, people will keep coming. But we can have a different focus. It's time to change, build it and they will come, to protect it and sustain it so we all can stay. We have a few challenges in front of us that will really make the difference. Our pressing problems are environmental protection in the face of rapid growth, school funding, affordable housing, and the growing split between the rich and the poor. These are the areas that we value that are not getting sufficient attention and are mired in false choices. School funding. Portlanders are now debating whether or not a one-year tax should be imposed upon Multnomah County businesses. The money would help fund our public schools until 1999, when the legislature can supposedly craft a longer-term solution. The false choice that's being debated is business health versus the health of the schools. The business community is saying that the tax may drive out businesses from the county. I think they may be right. I believe business when it says to me that the real issue is competitiveness and not money. I also appreciate the very hard work business did in Salem this year to support the schools. Yet, we all know that no city with a lousy school system can sustain itself economically, and business will suffer if the schools go down. This proposal has generated very contentious discussion, the Multnomah County business income tax. I support the modest tax increase, but only because we didn't get our collective act together and come up with a better option. At this point, we owe it to the children to take the best option we have. Business can help us to protect the business climate by emphasizing this is a one-year tax that protects a vital resource. But this is also a very short-term answer that only stops layoffs for 1 year. It doesn't solve the school's funding problems. We need a better choice. I agree with the old theory that you shouldn't criticize if you don't have a better option, so I have one. It is a regional business income tax for public schools, a tax that we could raise equitably from a corporate community that can afford to pay it. The revenues would go to schools throughout the region and also be tied to education performance standards. A united region would have the political strength to convince Salem that we shouldn't be penalized for adding additional resources to our schools. And it would allow us to support the equity formula, which has helped many rural districts while it has crippled our schools. In the greatest business climate in Portland's history, we certainly can afford good schools. We have to. I had hoped to see this kind of innovation move sooner, and I had spent the month of August calling leaders throughout the region to propose this idea. I had hoped to mobilize us around a more exciting option that didn't have the downsides of a Multnomah County tax. For most large businesses in the region, the cost would be far less than the kicker they are going to get back. The vast majority of small businesses wouldn't pay it. They would be exempt under Multnomah County rules if they were applied to the region. The long-term benefits are obvious. Although many people I talked to thought it was a good idea, very few had the time or the political will to act upon it. And now my phone is ringing constantly off the hook with people who are concerned about the Multnomah County tax. We can do better than this. There are other new ideas coming from the community. Parents have suggested a state-wide initiative that would limit class size, which is very controversial. A coalition of leaders led by the Oregon Public Employees Union have proposed an initiative to equalize the corporate and individual tax rates in order to raise more money for schools. We probably don't need all three of these solutions, but we must move all of these options into active discussions and come up with a package that will work. For too long, we in this room have sought the perfect solution, while anti-community forces have put measure after measure on the ballot. I'm absolutely convinced that Measure 47 would have failed if a more progressive alternative were offered, but it wasn't. Let's talk about the environment. When I was a kid growing up in Portland, we swam in the river and camped in the forest. Didn't think too much about it. We just assumed Portland was green. We were wrong on the river, it turns out. I've learned a lot about since being in charge of environmental services. Today, I think we still assume that Portland is making choices that are best for the environment. That's where our heart is, but all our choices may not be right. With all of the changes going on, we may be taking environmental stewardship for granted. An interesting and, to me, scary dynamic has developed around the issue of the health of our environment. It's another false choice, that environmental protection and economic development are mutually exclusive. I disagree. We really now stand poised to meet this challenge if we choose to think more creatively. When I was running for office last year, the Audubon Society sponsored a debate. The week before the debate, they sent me a really short question with 10 pages of background leading up to it, which you don't appreciate during a campaign schedule. The question was, why are these two policies concerning Southeast Portland's Johnson Creek in conflict? The background was two adopted city documents in which the same parcel of land was proposed as an industrial center in one and a wetland to collect flooding in the other. Both sides actually were doing their job at the city, but we had a problem of coordination. The good news is I think we're starting to think differently. Commissioner Francisconi, who's been assigned economic development in the outer southeast, and I have joined together and taken the ideas that were already there and joined them so that they make sense. We now see that the city's new plan to acquire the lands around the chronically flooding Johnson Creek is the best first step on the path to fixing the economy in a neglected neighborhood like Lentz. We see that blending economic revitalization plans and environmental strategies is common sense. The same is true for other waterways, but the challenge is much bigger. Now, as development increases, it is the time to recommit to our long-standing belief that the Willamette must be protected and enhanced. A beautiful, usable Willamette is the best long-term economic development strategy we could have. All of you know Mike Houck, and as he says constantly, what would look better on a brochure to attract visitors and business than a real picture of a Portlander catching a steelhead in the heart of downtown? A large percentage of the Willamette River's banks are in limbo right now. If we put the river at the mercy of market forces, a view of the Willamette won't be possible without spending $150 on a hotel room or $100 on dinner. There is no reason why the banks of the Willamette River should not belong to the public. As we invest $700 million as a community in the mammoth effort to stop sewage from filling the river, we can take advantage of the hard work of the Bureau of Environmental Services and coordinate this project with the Parks Department to try and help ensure that everyone has access to the river. A river that was once again safe for kids to swim in, or is safe for the first time in a long time. As the Commissioner of Environmental Service, which is in charge of the sewer project, Commissioner Francisconi, who has the Parks Department, I have joined again, and we'll be back with you early next year, and we hope to devise a strategy that will take everyone's help to enhance the Greenway and protect the Willamette. If we move now, I believe we can take advantage of the development activity in the city rather than lamenting it later. And we can join Governor Kitzhaber's initiative to link our work to the communities upstream. As Governor McCall fought for the public's right to the beaches several decades ago, we must do the same for the Willamette today. And just in case you're worried with my strong words on the Willamette, that your water commissioner has a hidden agenda, I don't want to drink the Willamette. Just protect it. That's why we need to work together. We need to work together to finish a congressional ban on logging in the Little Sandy, the last unprotected piece of the Bull Run system. The Bull Run system is another resource we can't afford to take for granted, and there's a little more work to do in Congress to protect it, and we're going to need your help. This won't come as a surprise. I'd like to examine the very important issue of housing and neighborhood health. In the past, the city has focused much of its infrastructure money in downtown, and if you go back to history, I think it was a good choice. We now need to realize that there's an important link between a strong downtown and strong neighborhoods. 6 years ago, when I first started working for Commissioner Gretchen Kafori, she asked me to work on housing issues. Our problem at that time was over 1,000 vacant houses in inner Northeast Portland, 1,000 just in the heart of Northeast Portland. Times have certainly changed. As you heard in a speech last week from Minnesota Representative Myron Orfield, affordable housing is disappearing from the urban core and incomes are remaining stagnant. The average price of a finished home in Portland in 1994 was in the range of $55,000. By 1997, the cost of the average home in Portland was close to $150,000. Meanwhile, incomes are stagnant. And as shocking as those numbers may sound, citywide averages just begin to tell the story of what has happened in lower income neighborhoods, where the price changes have been even more dramatic. Long-term residents are being priced out of their own neighborhoods. We now consider affordable housing to be $130,000 starter homes. We've been pushed to that. Like San Francisco and cities to the south, families earning less than $50,000 are being forced to the suburbs, while the wealthy are buying lofts in formerly economically depressed neighborhoods. Some of them are pretty cool lofts, but we've got some problems. Instead of charges of abandonment that I heard 6 years ago when I went out in the neighborhoods, I hear in the same neighborhoods complaints of gentrification, overdevelopment, and displacement. This is an important problem, We can't allow the choice to be neighborhood abandonment or gentrification. It's a false choice. We need a new and bold vision. We need to focus our efforts on a regional housing strategy. This approach should include new types of housing that are less expensive to build and that respond to this family size. The average family now is 2.7 people. The average house in Portland, as you well know, was built for many more. We need new types of units like duplexes and accessory rental units that are less expensive to build and have less impact on the environment. Now it's also a very hot time on this issue, and we need you to help convince our regional government to pass inclusionary zoning. The requirement that all large subdivisions in the region, or at minimum in the land that we add to the urban growth boundary, be required to include a significant number of housing units for people with average incomes. The market can do this if it plans for it now, and if it designs subdivisions and buildings with different size units. Government subsidy is absolutely needed for affordable housing at the lower income levels, but market innovation should serve the middle class. Right now it is not. Metro can fix that. If we don't have real and clear regional rules, we will end up with the type of tragedy that happened in Gresham this week and was reported in the paper today. The Gresham City Council used the data that you were presented here at this forum last week, that more poor people are moving to Gresham as Portland's prices go up, to justify a moratorium on affordable housing development in the city of Gresham. So now, Gresham, who has been doing better work than most of the cities in the region, has joined the suburbs who are trying to ignore this problem. Do any of us in this room really believe that if we don't build affordable housing, the poor will go away from Gresham or anywhere else? Of course not. They will concentrate in poorly constructed housing, and ghettos will begin to emerge in Gresham, Hillsborough, and all of the non-affluent communities in the region. Rather than pointing fingers at each other, let's support our regional government and make sure Metro joins all of us together, urban and suburban, in the effort to provide affordable housing. Inclusionary zoning, which Metro will be voting on this week, is a great place to start. Let's rise above our fear as a region and realize that not only does everyone need affordable housing, most of us live in it. Most of us bought houses when the prices were low. Affordable housing doesn't look like tenements found, doesn't have to look like tenements found in most large cities. In fact, affordable housing can improve the design of a neighborhood like it has in parts of Northeast Portland where we've invested. Economic diversity spread throughout Portland and the region benefits everyone, while the growing concentration of poverty, which is happening at an alarming rate, benefits no one. And we'll pay for poverty one way or the other. Schools and housing today or jails and prison tomorrow. Both cost money. While the region finds its way, Portland should continue to lead the way. Nothing makes me prouder of this community than the work we have done under Gretchen Kafori's leadership to invest in affordable housing. We need the region to join us, but while we work on the region, even we need to think a little bit differently. Portland's affordable housing work has been admirable and some of the best in the country, but we have not yet spent the extra effort necessary to put affordable housing in all neighborhoods. So now with prices rising, let's not just gentrify. Let's build starter homes for the young middle class in all neighborhoods, and let's build affordable rentals in all parts of town. Let's show that all of Portland's neighborhoods value everyone as we urge the region to help us. Concentrating the poor in smaller and smaller areas is the worst possible result, but that's what's happening. I guess my theme today is simple. We can't forget those things that have made Portland special, those things that we used to take for granted. Good housing, good schools, a good environment, a good standard of life for everybody. At this crossroads in time, we need to turn our attention back to those fundamental concerns. As I've said constantly, being a city commissioner is a great job. It's a real challenge. The necessary tools to solve many of our problems exist, but it's busy. In the last year, I found myself running all the time, juggling things, too many things at once. And with the pace that I'm keeping and the city government is keeping, I see the easy things getting done very, very well. But I see the tougher ones tending to get reshuffled. We're saving them for a day when there's more of that elusive but necessary ingredient, time. It kind of reminds me of an old theory in office work that I've used from time to time. If you ignore a memo long enough, it eventually disappears. Unfortunately, these issues aren't going away. After a year on the City Council, if I had to make one observation, it would be, we must make the time now to work with each other on these difficult challenges. With the busy days at City Hall and throughout the community with the things all of you do, we move quickly and attend to the business at hand. But doing the easy jobs well and dealing with the urgent crises as they come up will not deliver us the time we need to tackle the fundamental problems that are growing in this city and are going to change it, perhaps beyond repair. We have two paths in front of us. One is to forfeit the health of our rivers, land, and air to the demands of growth, to deny many of Portland's families basic access to housing and economic opportunity, and maybe to let the country's very best school system slip away. Our second choice, the one I hope we can embrace, and I think we can, is to nurture and protect those other elements of Portland that other large cities have lost. We need to get our priorities straight. We need to think like a region, be more careful with growth and investment throughout it, fund our schools, make sure that Portland works for everyone and not just those who make money on growth. A sustainable economy and future should be our goal. Think differently, ask new questions, search for connections instead of conflicts. But most of all, turn back to our basic values for guidance on where to spend the precious resources of money and time. We know what to do. The small jobs will continue to get done, but these larger issues, how will our city grow, who will benefit, what do we have to do to ensure economic, environmental, and educational health, these need more work now. My vision for the future is, I think, both ambitious and I think achievable. Portlanders are an ambitious people. If we weren't, we would not have created the strong city we have right now. If this challenge sounds great, then so is the payoff. If we change our thinking, pay more attention to the real problems, and stay true to our vision and our values, we may just build a magnificent city. Not a good city like Seattle, not a great city for some people like San Francisco, but a great city for everyone. Let's build a great city for everyone. Thank you.
Commissioner Sten, I know I speak for everyone in the room when I say I very much appreciate seeing your first year in office through your eyes. Your reflections are most provocative, and I look forward to the next several years. My question concerns an issue that you didn't address, and that is to the east and to the west of the city of Portland, to the north and to the south. Portland General Electric is rolling out an open access pilot to give Oregonians, for the first time, access to the electricity market. I'm curious about what the city of Portland is willing to do to protect low-income customers who live within the city's boundaries. And I'm interested also in knowing what you're working on right now to protect the city in a deregulated environment from the risks.
Good question. The mayor did assign me the energy office when I started. In the past, the energy office hasn't always been, it's a wonderful office. We do all sorts of things, but it hasn't been controversial. We work on weatherization, energy conservation, all sorts of things. We've had lots of innovative programs. Now, with me in the helm, the energy office has been the point person for trying to figure out how Portland should respond to deregulation. Two comments. First, I think we need to take our time on deregulation, as Representative DeFazio said here a few months ago. I don't think it's something that should be rushed into, and certainly this region shouldn't support rushing into it because we get a really good deal on electricity and we will get a worse deal under deregulation. That all being said, it's sort of like some of the issues in the speech. We need to be very aggressive and plan on this issue, and actually we've been hard at work at it, and there was a whole section in the speech, but I ran out of time. I'm working on a proposal with the Energy Office that has, at its initial stage, has the support of the unanimous support of the City Council. We are going to propose that the City of Portland become an aggregator, is the technical word. The less technical word would be super consumer. That's one that was in the Oregonian, of electricity. And that as we go into a deregulated environment, and this gets complicated, our ability to get a good price and hopefully public benefits, meaning energy conservation programs, low-income programs, is probably going to be more dependent on our ability to barter it through the marketplace. So we are going to see if it makes sense, and I think it probably does, for Portland to basically buy electricity from the competitive market as a block for citizens and businesses. It would still be completely competitive if we followed this type of model. Any citizen at any time could buy their electricity from anybody they wanted. If you want the pint of ice cream or whatever it is that you get the phone call about that night, you could switch and buy your electricity from anybody. But if you chose not to do that, you would buy with a large block from the City of Portland. And right now, that's the best strategy we can come up with to say, how do you respond and take advantage of the benefits of deregulation, but keep a large enough pricing block? And then, of course, to get the contract with the city, we would look at both price and public benefit, low income, energy conservation, and renewable resources. So that's a very short answer on a complicated question, but I'll stop there because there's others.
My name is Ed Marks, City Club member. Commissioner Sten, even if inclusionary zoning is found to be constitutional, and that's problematic, it won't work. It won't work to provide enough affordable housing to fill the needs of our community. My question is, are you willing to work with me and the home building industry to find real solutions to the affordable problem? They are out there. We have some suggestions. They do not include forcing business people to do things that are not economic and don't make sense.
Thanks. Absolutely. We have some disagreements on people who pay a lot of attention to this, whether or not the proposal at Metro is, and the percentage is different as you talk to different councilors, but somewhere in the range of, in a large subdivision, 10 or 20% of the units would be required to build for people at median income. Median income in the City of Portland for a family of four is $47,000. I believe that can be built in through good design. When I was negotiating the River District discussions, the developers in the River District told me they could do that type of housing in the River District, but they couldn't do it if everybody in the region wasn't required to do it because it's an unfair playing field. So if that ends up but I also agree that it's a very small piece. We need sources of money to support affordable housing, and there are other ways to get after it. So there's lots of strategies that I would take in addition to inclusionary zoning. There's aggressive strategies that I would take instead of inclusionary zoning. I think it's the one that's on the table, and we have a disagreement whether it will work or not, but I think we could craft a whole variety of solutions so long as we make them regional. Dr. Crawshaw.
Ralph Crawshaw, member of the City Club. I'm speaking of the president
I've got to guess.
the Bull Run Heritage Foundation. I first of all want to say that your example this year of accessibility to citizens is remarkable, exemplary, and I hope through your whole political career you have your door just as open as it is now. And in keeping with this talk, I'd like you to reflect, if you would, a little bit about the Bull Run's long-range planning, and that is about the year 2020. Is this a prudent time for the city to begin thinking about a third dam in the Bull Run Forest Reserve?
This is great. You guys have all given me questions that could easily fill a City Club hour, so energy deregulation is one of them. To put the Bull Run in context right now, and I've learned a lot about the specifics of the water system, other than that the Water Bureau consistently for 100 years gives you good, clean water. It is not correct to frame to Portlanders, and your common sense will tell you this is true, to say that we're short on water in Portland. I mean, look around, it rains. We have lots of good clean water in the region. We're short on storage. We don't have enough, we've grown enough that we don't have enough water at certain times during the year, and we project that 30 years from now we won't have water even in the rainiest seasons, because we can only store as much room as our reservoirs have. So the question becomes, somewhere in the next 20 to 30 years, we have to have more water. If the steelhead listing and some other things hit us adversely, we could need more water sooner. And what we're going to do now, and this is something I'm really pushing on with the Water Bureau, and they agree with it, is we're going to try and figure that out right now. I think we can continue to drink the Bull Run in perpetuity, but putting a new dam or any of the other strategies that would allow us to store more Bull Run water, and there are a few different ways to try and do it, are big ticket items. They're expensive. We certainly cannot do them probably this year with the sewer projects going on. So my concern is that if we put off the specific plan on how to extend the water system longer and longer, it's sort of what I'm getting at, let's look at the problem now, and we wait 20 years, and it really is about 20 years, we'll be stuck with very bad options because we won't have the time and money to do the more difficult things like expanding the Bull Run supply. That's where you get into a situation where you have to drink the Willamette because there's no other choice, which most people don't want to do. So I think what we're going to do now, it's a pressing concern to get moving on, but it's also very important that we take our time and not make stupid decisions. In about 2005, your water bill, if you live in Portland, is subsidized by those of you who don't live in Portland. We sell water to the suburbs, and it costs a little bit more. Those contracts run out in the next 6-7 years to the suburbs, and they're 30-year contracts. So in the next 4 or 5 years, we have to come up with a concrete plan for where our water is going to come for the next 30 years, and that's where we put it on the table, and we do it out in the community with a lot of talk. And there, Portlanders are going to have to start valuing, okay, you'd rather drink this source than that source. How much more will you pay for it? And those are the kind of questions that I think we can answer. And the analogy I make on the water system is, let's make it a 30-year mortgage and pay it off over time. Almost nobody could afford the house we need if you had to buy it in 1 year. So we need to get moving on that. It's not going to jump on us in the next couple of years, and I think we're on it.
Sandy Marin, City Club member. I have a two-part question for you. Since I believe you were not there for the council vote, do you agree with the council's decision to immediately start construction of a community center at Gabriel Park, irrespective of the fact that the siting decision was being considered by the State Court of Appeals? And secondly, what message does this council's decision say to Portland citizens about the right of due process?
Thanks. Government is making hard choices constantly, and that's a cliche, but it's a real one if you're in my job. I don't think that the city has done everything perfect on the Gabriel Park. It's been a very contentious issue. We had a long hearing on the land use matter, I think back last spring, it may have been May. We had probably 200 citizens on each side of the question. We had long arguments. I became convinced and am convinced that there's a need for a community center in Southwest Portland, and I wish I had a better option, but I think the best place to put it that's available to us is Gabriel Park, and I think it will fit in. And it's a tough one. You had a citizens council that worked on this for over a year. You had all sorts of things, and it's a real shame that we're fighting over where a community center goes instead of the questions I talked about in my piece, and I just, and it's a real shame that some of the charges that are being leveled against the council, like not caring about open space because we made a tough decision to put it there, those are just nonsense. People don't want it in Gabriel Park, and they have a right, and I think they have a valid argument, and I was torn on which side to go on, and I didn't have a third choice. But the idea that this council doesn't support the environment because it's taking a corner right next to a pump house, it's an urbanized corner of a park, and putting a swimming pool for kids in, that's not fair. The dispute is fair, but the charges being leveled against the council aren't fair. When it got to this fall, we were faced with a difficult choice. The Land Use Board of Appeals approved the decision of the Parks Bureau's placement with not one finding. In the history of land use, you'll almost never see those types of decisions, if ever, turned over by a court of appeals. We had two choices: to hold on the decision for another 6 months, and if anybody's in construction in the room, that will guaranteed put the cost of the project up another 10% at your cost, taxpayers, or to go forward. Difficult choice, but I had to vote to go forward based on those circumstances.
David Allred, club member. We've all heard and thought a lot about some of the difficult choices and challenges ahead of us. And I believe that we have a wealth of talent in the citizenry of this area and their involvement in neighborhood associations. How do you think these groups and these people can best aid the city government and the city bureaus in making these choices and making the right choices? Thank you.
Well, it's a hard question. I guess I would say two things. One, do what you do, which is pay attention to your neighborhood and advocate to us about things that you see. There's no substitute for what neighborhood associations have, which is the local knowledge and the passion about their own issues. But I want to add a caveat if I'm really speaking to the neighborhood associations. Spend some time now and do some extra work to reach out and engage the people who aren't coming to the neighborhood association meetings, because although I think the opinions are very, very important, and they move me all the time. I mean, Sellwood neighborhood moved me this week to support less density in a certain part of their neighborhood, and which I would never support on affordable housing basis, is because they had thought the thing through, and they had figured it out, and they had figured the better place to put the housing in their neighborhood, and we had to go with that. I mean, we haven't voted, so but I had to go with that. But my fear is, and it's not. You know, I don't see the full cross-section of Portland coming in to testify to the council. And it's not a criticism of the people testifying. I compliment them. They're the ones taking the time. But I need the folks at the neighborhood associations to help all of us try and figure out where are the people in your neighborhoods that are not testifying, and how do we get them involved in this. So I think the basic method that's followed the neighborhood associations is solid. I don't see any reason to particularly change it. It has its warts, but it's better than almost any place in the city. I just would like to sort of say back to the neighborhood associations, how can I help you, what you're trying to do, get the people who aren't coming to your meetings there, because it is skewed a little bit in terms of who's taking part in the process.
Andrew Wheeler, member. I was intrigued with Mike Haug's idea of steelhead. This is the third time steelhead are coming up today. I was, however, kind of all of a sudden hit with the idea that the backdrop for the photograph might be the East Bank Freeway when the sun is setting. And I kind of want to know where that 52 acres will be come years ahead.
Well, another sort of perennial Portland question. I've fallen on the side. I mean, I can't support spending money to move the freeway. I mean, I just can't do it. I mean, I think it's as ugly as anyone here. I mean, not you guys. I mean, I think whoever thinks, whoever can make the ugliest description of the freeway, ditto. I'm with you. But I just can't. I can't budget money even to plan to move it, given the kind of problems we've got. I mean, I could budget it to the schools to have the fifth graders do it if we could get them some more teachers, to think about it. But I can't put money into it. I think what we could do, though, this is a Blumenauer idea. It's not mine, and I think it makes some sense. This is Earl thinking big here, but he sold me on it. I mean, so I'm going to try and sell you. Could we start looking at the useful economic life of this thing, which is maybe 20 to 30 years, and plan on getting rid of it instead of continuing to fix it, because these things wear out. And could we make a longer-term plan to recapture that side and get rid of it? I mean, the plan to move it, I couldn't go with. I mean, the idea of spending billions of dollars, literally, to move it farther back into southeast Portland, I can't do it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. But I think maybe if we thought that by 2020 or 2030, we could plan a city where that wasn't there, with Metro's help, to get people around the region. I think that's a doable vision. So I kind of want to answer it two ways.
I'm Ray Polani, a City Club member. Commissioner Sten, you touched briefly upon sustainability quality of life, energy conservation. Well, with more automobiles than people in the region, what about funding alternative transportation? That seems to be the problem. There is no money.
Yeah, we've had a lot of energy on the city council in Representative Blumenauer and now in Commissioner Hales, who's worked his behind off. And so in some ways, I've been a supporter of their efforts and have not been out front because, you sort of lead, you let them lead the charge, and I've been trying to do my part. Commissioner Hales worked harder than anybody I have ever seen this spring in Salem. I mean, he was down there once a week for a full day, and if you take the demands of his job, that is extraordinary. I mean, Charlie was relentless in trying to get this and to get a gas tax package, and we lost. So I don't know what the right way to go right now is. I mean, I'm at a little bit of a loss. I've supported every measure that's been out there. I'd pay myself a lot more for gas, particularly, I'd be a lot more happy about paying more for gas if it went to alternative transportation and not just roads. That much be clear. So, I guess what I can say is I want to be one of the parties that regroups. I hope I had some better ideas than the ones I'm criticizing on the subjects I talked about today, but I don't have one yet on how to get the voters to support transportation. But it's as critical as you make it out to be.
Hi, Eric. Doreen Binder, City Club member. I continue to appreciate the fact that we talk about affordable housing. For my issue, working with homeless people, the issue is low-cost housing. And then again, a component of that is employment. So we were wondering, is there or should there be a component to hiring low-income people in your $700 million sewage project?
That's a great question. We should talk about that. I think so. The Bureau of Environmental Service, I think Harvey Lockett's here and Dean Marriott's here, who have worked very, very hard so far to try and spread the $700 million project to make sure we're doing minority contracting and contracting to emergent small businesses. And we've still been struggling with that and have not gotten down to the level of trying to find jobs. But I think we ought to take a look at that piece. Another piece that I think we could really look at over time is departments themselves. We've got this may not get all the way down to the chronically homeless in this case, but we have an amazing opportunity that actually our labor unions have been some of the most forward-thinking in the country about, in that in water particularly, over half, I think, of our 450 employees will be retiring in the next 10 years because of the demographics of the workforce. And so we've got a great opportunity to take both our contracts in the short term and see if we can do some of those things, and also see if over the next 10 years we could work with our workforce and have the outgoing talent mentor some people who haven't been working for the city in the past. And I've heard just an outpouring of folks on the labor side that would like to do that. We've got to build the time into their work schedules so they can actually have a few minutes to do that, and we're going to try and do that. But I guess my real comment is thanks for pushing me on that. That's a good idea.
Anthony Jenkins, I have a question again about affordable housing, home ownership opportunities. As we try to build more housing, we're finding that the fees for building permits and permitting fees are really causing an issue. Is there some thought about how we can justify those fees for nonprofits who are building affordable home ownership opportunities, and what can we do about that?
Well, for many, many years, Gretchen has been trying to work on the concept of not raising the price of affordable housing as some of the city costs go up. I mean, there's an interesting clamor right now. I mean, one side of the community is, really wants to see growth pay a lot more. Another side is very nervous about that. And actually, in the case of system development charges and fees, the development industry and the city and citizens have been pretty thoughtful in coming together. We've recently introduced a transportation system and development charge, which it's pretty thoughtful. And two things it does, and it kind of gets to your question, Anthony, and maybe slightly to raise. It doesn't fund things enough, but we're going to exempt buildings from the systems development charge that are very transit oriented. So most of the central city, if you're on the bus mall, won't pay that charge. And so we're going to try and build incentives into our pricing structure to do things. If you're on a main bus line, you won't pay that charge. Affordable housing will not pay that charge. And so I don't know that we're ever going to get the permit fees down. What we've decided to do on nonprofit housing is, rather than trying not charge the permit fees, On those housing projects that we subsidize, we've tried to build the permit costs into the amount of money the city contributes to the program. On our system development charges and the idea of trying to make growth pay its fair share, wherever that fair share may be, we're trying to exempt certain types of uses like affordable housing and transit-oriented development to try and get at that issue.
Dan Goldie, member, City Club. We've heard all this focus on affordable housing. There are two approaches. One is to get more low-cost housing, possibly through subsidies, but there's another one that has not really been focused on today. The other approach is to raise the incomes of the people living in the pockets of poverty in the urban area. And that can be done by giving them access to the high wage jobs that are being created basically in the suburbs. And you can do that. We will have two legs on the transportation stool when the West Side light rail is in, so people can go from the central city to the good jobs in the suburb. But we are going to be lacking the north-south route. We'll have east-west, but not north-south. My question is, what is your position and that of the City Council on getting back to moving that north-south rail system?
Well, there's kind of two things in there. I want to just make a quick comment on the first one. It's very good logic, which I actually agree with, that if you're trying to raise the standard of living, one way is to get the price of housing down, the other is to get the wages up. The challenge, and I want to hear from you if you've seen it, is things that the local government can do to raise wages of people who are underemployed. We've tried a lot of things in Portland. We've worked for a long time on a theory that if we give a tax abatement to a large company to move into Northeast Portland, that will help unemployed Northeast Portlanders. By my research, and I've spent a lot of time on it, it's not true. If you look at people who are healthily and gainfully employed, there is no correlation between where they live and where they work. So we've used some flawed models, I think, to try and get at that raise the wages issue. The one thing that I know, and I'm not saying there aren't things we can do, there are some good partnerships. The city a long time ago started a very good partnership with Vacher. And Vacher now puts money into Benson High School. They give a guarantee to those kids that they can get a job if they're ready to go to work after high school, if they go through the program. That works. Vacher gets good employees, Benson gets a little help. The city, when they originally brought Vacher here, gave them some financial help. I'm not convinced you can't do some things, but simply the theory that giving business a break and requiring them to do so will help lower income people, I haven't seen. The one thing that I know, and I'm still open to innovative ideas, but this is a challenge nationwide. The one thing I know correlates absolutely to income is education level. There's no question about it. Any study will prove that out. So long term, you want to get the chronically unemployed employed, stick with the school system. Short term, I think you're getting at something though, which is we have to work as a region, and if jobs are in the suburbs, our people who are unemployed ought to work out there. In terms of our commitment on north-south light rail, things have been moving really quickly and negatively. We don't have a very good strategy right now for what the city council can do to jumpstart it. I think the interest is there from all five of us, but it's sort of a, I'm not sure what the right strategy is. Commissioner Hales, again, is working pretty hard on it. He's also exploring, and these are going to be controversial questions, should we try and run a spur to the airport instead of the big picture first? Should we try and build some smaller pieces to try and make the system keep coming? I don't know the answer to that. So I know that transportation folks at the city are pushing on this issue and they have my support, but I'd be lying if I said we had a great strategy to get that one back on track. Are we done?
Thank you.
We're done.
Well, I certainly want to thank Commissioner Erik Sten for what is clearly a continuing burst of enthusiasm and intelligence that he's brought to this job. I thank the City Club members for their always wonderful questions. And today I cannot resist thanking as well Commissioner Kafori, who sat here with the most incandescent maternal smile that I have ever seen throughout this presentation. Please join Commissioner Kafori and Commissioner Sten, City Club members, and become one as well. We are adjourned.